is the season doomed if the 49ers hold on to Jimmy Garoppolo the whole time?
Yes. No, and I'm going to take it a different direction because I have a feeling I think I know what direction you're going to go. So I'm going to try to steer clear of that. But everybody talks about all in with the 49ers, and they're frustrated. A lot of people are frustrated that they have not gone all in on this offseason. But there are multiple ways, Grant, that you can go all in. You can go all in free agency, but you can also do what the 49ers did in 2019, which was they traded for D Ford during the offseason. They got Quan Alexander. Well, the 49ers have kind of splurged on a player, a second tier player like a Quan Alexander and Travarius Ward. They don't need to trade for a D Ford because they still have some good draft picks and they're a much better team, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
But once they started out hot, what did they do? They went all in trading for Emmanuel Sanders.
Right.
And every year there are these players. Last year, Odell Beckham cleared waivers because nobody had the money to pay him what he was making, and he wanted to play for the Rams or the Packers.
Right.
Well, if somebody hits the waiver wire and the 49ers start out hot and Jimmy's not on this team and they've reserved that money, they can pay that player.
Yes.
Or they can trade for a player and bring in some big salary because they have the money to do so.
Real quick, a big reason the Rams won the Super Bowl this past season is because they were able to bring on Odell Beckham Jr. and Von Miller. Straight up.
Yes. And they did it differently. They had the other teams pay the salary, at least for Von Miller, and they had to give up a second and third round to make that happen. The 49ers wouldn't have to be that desperate. Von Miller probably could have been traded for like a fifth round pick last year, but the fact that the Rams needed Denver to eat his salary, they had to give up way more. So because of that, the 49ers having that salary can definitely go all in. Certainly they haven't done so yet. I understand the frustration, but it doesn't mean that they still don't have an opportunity to do so. If Jimmy is on this roster all the way through, they certainly have no chance of going all in unless they want to overpay like the Rams did to get a guy and have the other team eat that player's salary. Why would you do that for a backup quarterback that you're paying $27 million? That makes zero sense to me.
Agree. That's a very astute, financial, pragmatic explanation as to why holding on to Jimmy Garoppolo isn't feasible. But I want to talk about another way. I mean, it's not just for the fan base, but you got to give the team in the locker room a leader. You can't, like last year, what the Niners did was they traded for Lance, but they were like, look, Jimmy's the starter. They made it so clear all year. Jimmy's the starter. Lance is really young. He needs to learn. This year, they won't say that. This year, they're like, well, we want to trade Jimmy. And we'd like Lance to be a starter. But we haven't traded Jimmy. And we might have a competition. And it's like, you can't do that. You got to tell your team who their leader is. Otherwise, you're screwed. I mean, what other contender isn't settled at quarterback? Contender. I mean, the Seahawks aren't settled, but they could have the number one pick in the draft next year. So you got to tell your team who to rally behind. Last year you did. You told them to rally behind Jimmy. This year you haven't said it yet. And again, if you bring back Jimmy, he's got to start. Otherwise, if he's on the bench, he's nitpicking. Kittle's nitpicking. The spreadsheet's nitpicking. There's a lot of people saying Jimmy would have done it better. Jimmy, the fantasy of Jimmy Garoppolo that does not exist would really tear this team apart. If you have two number one quarterbacks, you have none. You got to choose one. You chose last year. You haven't chose this year. You got to choose one. And Jimmy, I don't think he can be a backup on this team. I think there's too much emotional investment in some of these players, some of these analysts, some of these fans. It's got to go.
Well, and I said on last week's show, and I still believe this based off of what Shanahan said, I think that they have chosen Trey Lance.
Good.
But the problem with that is that even if you quote unquote have chosen Trey Lance, if you keep Jimmy on this roster, you haven't really chosen Trey Lance. Even if he's your starter, you still haven't chosen him.
Nope.
You cannot have Jimmy looking over his shoulder. And by the way,
Trey
the best situation, the best situation that you can do for Trey Lance is actually kind of screw Jimmy over. And that's why I said I would be cutthroat if I'm the 49ers. I'm waiting until he's healthy and can pass a physical. And then I'm saying, oh, guess what? It's super late. The season's about to start. You're cut. We're saving the full 25 million. Yeah. Good luck being a backup to Mac Jones or whoever else, because nobody's going to give you a starting job at this point. And now we don't have to hear about the comparisons with you and our quarterback at all. You had your surgery. You did what was best for you. Great. We're doing what's best for us. We tried to trade you. It didn't work. Trey's our guy. You're healthy. See you later. That's what I would do.
I've been covering the team since 2011. And I feel like I've gone through this before. This is Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick part 2. And when Harbaugh chose Kaepernick over Alex Smith, there were a lot of 49er fans that felt that was wrong. And it was a legitimate debate. I mean, we don't know what would have happened in 2012 if Alex Smith would have gotten his job back. We have no idea. But a lot of people thought that was messed up. I think a lot of people in the locker room thought it was messed up, and people chose sides. And then Alex Smith was gone, and it was never a talking point ever again. You can't let this linger. You can't let this linger. They didn't let it linger for Colin Kaepernick. He never had to look over his shoulder to Alex Smith. Alex Smith never had to be a backup. That would have been insane. They didn't do that. Don't do it now. I think it would really mess up the season. The Niners have a real opportunity. They missed a great opportunity to beef up the offensive line and the defensive line and make this team as good as it could possibly be. But they still have an opportunity to get rid of the biggest distraction possible. And what's interesting to me is, everyone says the reason Kaepernick isn't in the league is because he'd be a distraction, right? Mm-hmm. He's a backup quarterback, but he'd be the biggest story in the team. Is that not Jimmy right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what he is. He's the biggest story. He's the biggest distraction. This is what people were afraid Kaepernick would be, Jimmy.
Well, and I think it's different too. You look at last year, yes, the players were irritated with the questions. That was very noticeable. But at the end of the day, they got the guy that they think is the reason that they've won these games, right? They tie Jimmy to winning, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so next year, if you're getting these questions and you're not winning, and you've got a second-year player at the helm, but you've got the guy on the bench right there that you think can win you games, you don't think that's going to piss people off or people are going to choose sides? They didn't really have to choose sides last year. No, most people were going to ride with Jimmy, right? A big majority of the locker room was, because Jimmy's been there for many, many years. That is not the case if you choose Trey Lance. And by the way, as a franchise that wants to do right by Jimmy Garoppolo, do you think that doing right by Jimmy Garoppolo is to make him the backup of a team that these players think led to a Super Bowl and an NFC championship? Absolutely not. That is a mistake.
Do you know why Jordan Willis blocked that punt in Green Bay last year?
Why?
Because Jimmy Garoppolo motivated him
to. That's
inspired him. It was Jimmy Garoppolo's inspiration.
Can he inspire from the bench, though, Grant?
I'm just saying, like, if those things don't happen, if the Niners don't have that kind of luck with Trey Lance, it's going to be Lance's fault. Like, dude, Jimmy just makes it happen. I don't know what it is, but players play for him. I'm telling you.
Jimmy Magic.
The dumbest thing you've ever heard will be said like that. Players play. Anyway, Buddy Boy 88 says, do you realize if Jimmy stays because they want a comp pick, it just means they can't sign a high-priced free agent to offset it? In a year when the cap shoots up, they won't sign a big-name player. No, I don't understand how finances work. Explain that to me.
Well, basically, you get a comp pick for Jimmy Garoppolo if he stays on the team next year, as long as they don't splurge on a free agent that offsets Jimmy Garoppolo leaving. So he's saying that means if he stays all year, they want that comp pick. They're also not going to splurge next offseason, is I think what he's saying.
Oh, that's depressing.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. Wow, that's exactly what Buddy I did. He says, "Do you realize?" No, I didn't realize. That's awful. Yeah. But I think the 49ers have kind of felt like they're not a free agent destination because you know, young 20-somethings from the South and the Midwest don't want to live in Santa Clara. It's freaking expensive. And they don't sign to come out here. And so they have to focus on comp picks.
There's a really cool young hip coach in Miami where everybody wants to live. So
yeah, he's really smart for figuring that's like, oh, Kyle's stuck in Santa Clara where no one wants to be.
Yeah.
And no offense to Santa Clara. And I'll go to Miami. Danny says, hey, Grant, what do you think? Should we trade Deebo to the Jets and get 2 firsts this year and the second next year? Oh, wow. Should we talk about Deebo? I think we should.
I mean,
Deebo. Let's talk about Deebo. Hold on. So the price for Deebo is going up. He's probably going to cost $27 million a year and $70 million guaranteed, something like what Stephon Diggs got. So if the price for him is going up, I would think that the return in a trade for him is going up as well. I'm thinking the Niners could. Danny says 2 firsts this year and a second next. I don't know about that, but maybe a first and a second this year and a second next year. How about that?
If I'm getting 2 firsts and a second for Deebo, I want to be clear about this. I'm not advocating at all for trading Deebo, but if that's what you're giving me, and I can save the $25 million a year that it's going to cost him, while also replacing him with, let's say, Christian Watson and a hell of a edge pass rusher or something. Yeah, I don't know how I say no to that. I really don't.
I have a better idea. Don't trade Deebo. Trade Kittle. Create cap space. Trade Kittle. Trade him after June 1. Trade him for a pick next year. But to me, Deebo's the team. He's the Super Bowl window. He's the reason they made the playoffs. He's the reason they went to NFC Championship game. I wouldn't trade Deebo yet. Maybe in a couple of years, but not now. I don't think there's enough picks that could really, because I mean the Niners aren't that good at drafting. You really telling me they're gonna get a return on that investment? I would keep Deebo and freaking trade Kittle and Armstead. Other people who aren't living up to their money, I'd keep Deebo. That's how I feel.
But for that price, think about it. Think about it like this: if you're getting 2 firsts and a second, it's not just the picks, Grant. You're saving that money, which means what? You could now go sign a Tyrann Mathieu to play safety. So you're getting the picks plus a really good player that you can offset that contract with because you're bringing in cheap young rookies. So it's like you're giving me, let's say that's the deal, 2 firsts and a second, and I get to sign Tyrann Mathieu. I don't know, man. That's a hard pass. But let me be clear. Again, I'm not advocating for trading Deebo. And I've always said this about Deebo. Let's pretend the 49ers are a college football program. Who's the guy that you want talking to your new recruits? Who's the one showing them around campus and making sure they have a good time and setting the tone of this is what we expect here at this college program? It's probably Deebo Samuel, right? If the 49ers are a college program, Deebo's the guy that you're having set the tone with all the new incoming guys. So you don't want to just trade Deebo. I wouldn't actively shop him, but if somebody came to me with that deal, man, I don't know. I don't know if that's quarterbacks go for less than that. What did Russell Wilson just go for? 2 firsts and a second, essentially, or 2 firsts, a fifth, a sixth, and a couple players, something like that. Like you're gonna give me more than what Russell Wilson just netted for the Seahawks? I don't know, man. That's a tough pass.
I don't know, man. This to me, see, I think the Niners could talk themselves into trading Deebo. I really think this is a possibility because he's getting very expensive, and they did this with Buckner. This is exactly what they did with Buckner. All right. Buckner was really good, but he wanted to be paid like top 3 at his position. And the Niners were like, no, like we don't value your position that much. Like we think we can replace you with Javon Kinlaw. Like, no, absolutely not. And so while Deebo Samuel is really good, are they going to pay him top 3 at his position? Or are they going to say, we're not going to spend quarterback money on wide receivers? It's not something we're going to do. And you know what? You have only had one great year. And you know what? part of your value is playing running back. And how are we going to play with running back when we're spending $27 million a year on you? I think there's a real possibility the Niners trade him, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's a big mistake. I think you want to trade someone, trade Kittle. You want to trade someone, trade Armstead. This to me is Buckner 2.0. Really, I think they really got to. I think he's worth it. If you want him to prove it one more year, fine. Then pay more for him next year. But I wouldn't trade him. I don't think he's too important. He's like 2 or 3 players. He's a wide receiver and a running back. I think he's too important. I think he's too hard to replace.
Yeah, he would be. And that's why I'm saying, like, I can't just actively shop Deebo. But if that is the deal I'm getting, here's the thing is since we're talking Deebo now and he's kind of put us on the topic, we can talk about the contract thing, right? We can talk about what just happened today with Diggs. So Diggs basically got an extension. Now we haven't seen the details, and this is why the details are important. But even without the details, it's around 24 annually. Devontae Adams, I know he got a gigantic deal. It looks like it's massive. But if you break down that deal, it's really a 2-year, $26 million deal is basically what it is, 26 a year. And Tyreek Hill, his deal is essentially 3 years, 28 million annually. I think Deebo is going to land where I've basically said all season long or all off season long, it is at that $25 million annually contract. That's what he's going to get roughly. And I was comfortable paying that at the beginning of the offseason. I'm certainly comfortable paying that now. Again, I'm not actively shopping him, but if that's the deal that comes with it, I'm saying yes to that. I just am.
Chance says Jimmy's fast release was good to make our O-line look decent, but Lance will make the defense hesitate that half second. And that will open up the whole playbook, especially with the threat of the quarterback run. What I'm excited for with Lance is the play action pocket movement. Get him out of the freaking pocket. Set him up way on the perimeter because he's going to really accelerate out there quickly, and it's going to give him a lot of time and space to throw. Plus, he can run out there. He's a dual threat.
Absolutely. Yep. I love that.
Thank you, Chance. Matthew says, honestly, any professional athlete that pouts and says Jimmy would have been better is soft AF, and that ish should have been coached at in Pop Warner. Oh, no. I'm telling you, if that's your friend, if that's your, like, from Kyle Juszczyk's perspective, from Kittle's perspective, they grew up together with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not going to see it from Jimmy's perspective. They're not going to, they're going to let Trey Lance learn on the job. They're going to be like, no, Jimmy would have hit Kittle. Jimmy would have thrown him more. No, it's a mistake. You got to force these guys to fall in line with Trey Lance. Otherwise, they're going to make their own choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what people, I understand when people say it, but I also don't like it when people say, well, these guys are making millions of dollars. So that takes the human element out of things. It doesn't. These are still human beings. They're just human beings with a lot of money that are really good at football. Doesn't mean that they don't have emotions. Doesn't mean that they're not going to pick favorites. Now, it also doesn't mean that it's going to become a distraction that causes them losses necessarily. But to say it's not a distraction, or people aren't thinking about it, or people aren't acting as humans and choosing, I think that that's unrealistic. Like, that's just the way that it is. You got a lot of these guys, Grant, by the way, that play football because it's a job to them and they make money. Like, not every player loves the game. I know that baffles some people, but there are plenty of players that are just really good football players. Certainly they try their best to win. That's their job, but they don't do it because they love playing football, right? The 49ers, I think, have done a great job of getting a locker room full of guys that do genuinely like to play. And you hear that from Shanahan and Lynch because that is a real thing. There are plenty of players that are not football junkies. They do it because they're good and it pays well.
But they want to win. And if
for sure
Trey Lance loses week 1, a lot of those people are going to be like, look, I don't know why, but we win with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm pissed. I'm telling you. Anyway, we've talked about that enough. Remember when Deebo pulled up in the backfield with no contact and the entire stadium gassed as if the season was over? Sure want to chance it again? Yeah, like, how many injuries did Deebo play through last year? I'm telling you, I don't think you really want him to be playing that much more running back. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But at the same time, the whole team is built around him doing it.
Long term, I don't want him to be playing running back. No.